Hi everyone, welcome to our presentation on the challenges of the multiple roles of teachers. This presentation was made and is presented by Bahja, Ayesha, Megan, Chase, Habeebah, and Makenna. We'll now move into our introduction. The present-day role of an educator is a unique and honorable lifelong journey that is rooted in empowering and preparing the future generations to be active and contributing citizens. The teacher figure not only acts as a professional educator, but is also pulled in a number of directions within their role, some of these including a social worker, therapist, an extracurricular coach, and so many more. Teachers thus care for the whole student and often assume the role of in loco parentis, meaning that they take on the responsibility of taking care of the individual needs and act in a way that respects and considers what is best for the student. According to the fiduciary obligation that teachers take on, they are responsible for showing care, building trust, and maintaining integrity as they support the growth and learning of their students. The above quotes, stated by John C. Maxwell, portrays the integral part of the educator role that is rooted in building authentic relationships with students. The quote states, "Students don't care how much you know until they know how much you care." Often this care shown towards students can be demonstrated and built not only in the classroom, but especially outside of the classroom context. As teachers invest additional time and energy into areas of student interests ranging from extracurricular sports to involvement in clubs and fairs that are taking place at a particular school. The TQS, or the Teaching Quality Standard, provides educators with 6 clear and detailed expectation pillars of their role. It's important to note that the first of these is fostering effective relationships. A few of the key points listed on this slide and from this particular pillar include acting consistently with fairness, respect, and integrity, as well as demonstrating empathy and genuine caring for others. Although our role as educators is to equip youth and adolescents with the knowledge and skills to participate and thrive in life after school, I don't believe this can fully be achieved without a trusting, respectful, and caring foundational relationship between the student and teacher. These characteristics within the role can be built through the various roles that teachers occupy that we have mentioned on the previous slides. Despite the obligation of teachers to foster these effective relationships with their students that was previously outlined in the TQS, there are certainly boundaries set out to maintain a professional relationship between the student figure and the teacher. The Code of Professional Conduct for Teachers and Teacher Leaders from 2022 addresses and outlines a number of expectations for teacher behaviors, specifically with regard to teacher and student relationships. One of the points from this document addresses and calls on teachers to behave in a manner that maintains the honor and dignity of the profession, as well as teachers refraining from engaging in activities that adversely affect the quality of the teacher's or the teacher leader's professional service. Overall, teachers are obligated to act in a manner that reflects integrity, protects the image of the school or board that they work under, and always maintains honesty and trust. Ocute and Estive provide perspective on the ever-present and diverse demands that are placed on teachers, not only their legal obligations, including to follow the curriculum, but engaging students in the learning process in a way that is respectful, considerate of the needs of students, and always looking out for the best interest of the child. Ocute and Estive's work states that the increased demand put on the teacher's role is a historical fact. Teachers are continually asked to assume more and more responsibilities. At the present time, teachers cannot insist that their tasks are limited only to developing the cognitive skills of their pupils. In addition to knowing their subjects well, today teachers are expected to facilitate learning, be an efficient educator, and organize work groups. Teachers must also teach, care for the psychological equilibrium of the pupils, help their social integration, and attend to their sexual education. In summary, the expectations of the role of teachers has expanded greatly and has required educators to gain more knowledge on particular disciplines and tasks, while also attending to the varying needs of all of their students.
Now we're moving on to the background section where I'm going to be covering 4 roles that teachers play in addition to being an educator. There are, of course, many more than 4, but for the sake of time, I'll be covering 4 today. Starting off with teachers as parents. As we learned in class, teachers are automatically in charge of students, and we provide a standard of care which entails being the careful parent. We also touched upon the term loco parentis in Chapter 3 of the Teachers' Rights, Responsibilities, and Legal Liabilities document. This term means that the teacher stands in relation to the student in the position of a caring parent, as an unofficial guardian. This concept not only allows the teacher some privileges of a parent, but also brings with it added responsibilities for the protection of pupils. This shows how much of an impact this role has on your teaching practice by demonstrating that we must be vigilant like parents are with their children at all times to keep them safe. This also makes teachers focus on the moral and ethical upbringing of students, as well as shows that teachers must act as a role model for students, just like parents do. This concept also extends beyond the classroom and encourages teachers to act in a good manner outside the classroom as well. This impacts the education system at large by contributing to laws and new terms such as loco parentis, tort law, and parens patria. Teachers also act as agents of social welfare. In Chapter 6 of McKay, we see how teachers also work as rehabilitation counselors for young offenders, guidance counselors, and social workers. We see how teachers have to communicate with outside agencies, often to fill in their role. In regards to teachers as social workers, McKay states, "It is the goal of many good teachers to gain the trust of their students and help them develop as individuals, not simply as academics." This shows how, as being a social worker, we play a huge role in solving many problems for students and acting as caregivers. Oftentimes, students confide in teachers about issues they are having with drugs or crimes, which simultaneously pushes teachers to be social welfare agents. This can impact our teaching practice by damaging our reputation with the school board or result in employment sanctions if we fail to handle the situation properly. If we do handle the situation in a proper manner, this can result in a good relationship between teachers and students because this is vulnerable information the students are sharing, and this can create a strong bond. So we as teachers need to know how to deal with student confidentiality. Teachers as agents of social welfare impacts the education system at large as well by encouraging the system to add in more support and resources. It also encourages early intervention and prevention so we can help students get on the right track early. It impacts laws and policies as well in regards to confidentiality and any other information related to social welfare and students. The third role I'm covering is teachers as guardians of equality. As we learned, the Charter of Rights and Freedoms touches upon this topic in sections 7 and 15, which states that every individual is equal before and under the law and how everyone has the right to life, liberty, and security. We as teachers know that all of our students will be different and not all of our students will come from the same background, which is why as teachers, we need to act as guardians of equality. To be guardians of equality, we must focus on equity as learned in class. We will have students with physical disabilities or students who are neurodiverse. We will also have students that come from different backgrounds, such as EAL students, and we must try our best to try to create an equitable learning environment for them. We must also be willing to reach out for extra support for these students and learn as much as we can about them so we can help them in the best way. Being guardians of equality impacts the educational system at large as well by influencing the curriculum to be more inclusive and pushing teachers to learn inclusive learning strategies, as well as help students feel more comfortable and included in their educational journeys. The last role I'll be covering today is teachers as agents of the police. As we learned in Chapter 5 of McKay, the passage of the Young Offenders Act and the Youth Criminal Justice Act impacted and altered the traditional position of school teachers and admins in regards to young people. And young people who are engaged with the criminal law system oftentimes also face difficulty with authority in school, such as with teachers. And for this reason, teachers start to take on the role of being agents of the police. Being an agent of the police is so we can ensure that students become productive members of society and help students to the best of our abilities. And teachers act as agents of the police, as sometimes throughout our jobs, we may need to conduct personal searches, such as for drugs or other dangerous items. Of course, we must have reasonable grounds to do so, and we must do this in a minimally intrusive and sensitive manner. And if we know a student will physically resist, then we should call the police to handle the situation. Teachers sometimes run into situations where they also need to question students. And with a student who is involved with crime, this can be tricky. As McKay states, questioning students is a widespread practice in Canadian schools and can be a powerful tool in gathering evidence against young offenders. So this questioning, as stated, must be voluntarily done by the student, and voluntarily here is defined as, quote, without fear of prejudice or hope of advantage exercised or held out by a person in authority. And the person in authority here would be the teacher. A student must also be informed of their rights, just as police officers would inform other civilians of their rights, and they also have the right to a consultation with an appropriate adult before making any statements. And that's all for my section. Now we'll be moving on to the next.
In our case, we examine the many roles of teachers and how boundary lines can become blurred to the point where teachers may be viewed more as friends than authority figures. In our case, we examine the many roles of teachers and how boundary lines can become blurred to the point where teachers may be viewed more as friends than authority figures. In this case, we examine the conduct of Mr. Nelson, a 27-year-old coach from Block City High School. He is an alumnus of Block City High School and was an all-star player on the varsity football team when he attended. The Block City team has a reputation for being one of the best teams, and the students on the team have acquired high social status from other students and adults in the town. Mr. Nelson's enthusiasm and ability to connect with his students has meant developing great rapport with his students. His students often come to him for advice on multiple different matters. In this role, Mr. Nelson helps students with their college careers by selecting schools or athletic programs and connecting them to contacts that could get them scholarships. As discussed in the introduction of our presentation, it is evident that teachers are expected to fulfill multiple roles besides teaching as they interact with their students. For example, we've already learned that Mr. Nelson performs the role of teacher, counselor, and coach. As teachers, we wish to create strong relationships with our students so that they respect us as individuals with authority, thrive in our learning environment, buy into their own learning, excel, and grow to be well-rounded citizens. However, Mr. Nelson's behavior calls into question what the boundaries are for a teacher as they fulfill multiple roles with differing expectations. In this case, Mr. Nelson's lines of the role of teacher, careful parent, and other roles become blurred with the relationship of being his students' friends. He begins to become close to and invites a select group of students called the Inner Circle to his house in the evenings or weekends to socialize. Students who do attend gain a certain social status within the school. Mr. Nelson's get-togethers are reported to be more akin to parties and are rumored to include alcohol. In this case, Mr. Nelson plans on having another party to celebrate the end of another football season, with attendees including old football friends and current student football players. Faculty members have begun to question his professionalism and the potential underage drinking that occurs at these events and wants the principal to step in. This leads to many salient points we'll be discussing related to the profession of teaching and the multiple roles associated with teaching. It is important as teachers that we create positive relationships with our students by establishing respect, trust, and care in a student-teacher relationship. However, as previously discussed, as teachers, we must act in a manner that upholds the code of professional conduct for teachers and teacher leaders. As teachers, we are role models for our students, and how we behave outside of the classroom, especially in front of students, impacts their behavior. We wish to teach students to follow laws and become functioning members of society. Therefore, it is important to determine how teachers should behave, even in off-duty conduct, as well as on-duty conduct, and what boundaries are set in place for appropriate student-teacher relationships and teacher roles. Some salient points from the case that we'll be discussing are the boundaries of a teacher's off-duty conduct and the possible legal and policy implications. We will also discuss the appropriateness of Mr. Nelson's invitation of his students to his home to hang out, the potential legal issues surrounding the rumored illegal activities like underage drinking, as well as student favoritism and the potential loss of trust between students and teachers due to misconduct. These were chosen as salient points because they relate directly to multiple roles of teachers, including a professional role, coaching role, and teacher role. All roles that require boundaries and expectations that, when not upheld, cause the line for a teacher's role to become blurred.
The salient points listed coincide with professional conduct requirements concerning students, which reads as follows. The teacher or teacher leader shall not intentionally engage in an illegal activity or other activities that may cause a student to be put at or to remain at risk of harm or abuse, or knowingly encourage or enable a student to engage in an illegal activity or other activities that may cause a student to be put at or to remain at risk of harm or abuse. The Code of Professional Conduct for Teachers and Teacher Leaders lays out the expectations and proper conduct teachers and teacher leaders must adhere to. This document discusses appropriate conduct during school hours and details the expectations of teachers off duty. I wanted to include this quote from the Code of Professional Conduct. Society and the school community hold teachers and teacher leaders to a high standard of conduct. Teachers and teacher leaders are accountable for their conduct on and off duty, and are expected to conduct themselves with due regard to the honor, dignity, welfare, rights, and best interests of the students and the teaching profession. When looking at this quote in relation to the case study, a few issues arise. The main one is that some teachers believe that the coach is not wrong for inviting students over and hold the belief that it is not anyone's business what the coach and his players do outside of school. In the next slide, I will be discussing the issues and implications arising from that. When looking into the Code of Professional Conduct for Teachers and Teacher Leaders, I have listed 3 essential points in regard to the case study. The first point I listed is that there are implications that come with the various roles we take on as educators, but it is essential to maintain boundaries with our students. The second point I listed is that the environment we create for students and how it is sanctioned has a great impact on ensuring professional conduct. The third and final point I listed is that being off duty does not mean you as a teacher are absolved of ensuring your actions and behavior are in the best interests of students. As we have read the case study, we see that Mr. Nelson has garnered a relatively close bond with his football team, as they can reach out to him and discuss personal matters, which range from grades to girlfriends, and have been invited on multiple occasions to hang out at Mr. Nelson's house. The issue of professionalism arises as Mr. Nelson does not maintain an appropriate relationship with his students. There are even rumors that beer drinking and parties take place while the students are over. Another important thing to know is that the main event Mr. Nelson is hosting for his old football buddies, where he has also invited the better players on the team, will have alcoholic beverages served. This raises many concerns. The main one is that all the players are underage. This environment Mr. Nelson is creating might pressure or influence students to engage in underage drinking. This can result in many issues, such as students potentially driving home under the influence. As discussed in class, there is a high standard placed on teachers, and the lines can become blurred on when we should take off the hat. However, it is important to maintain those boundaries, even though the lines can sometimes become blurred. In this case, Mr. Nelson is also taking on the role of a counselor as he provides advice, but those lines become blurred as he is also discussing personal matters with the students. As I listed above, things such as relationships are discussed. The same can be said for when he invites students over to his house on weekends. This quickly becomes an issue where the students are no longer engaging with the coach as a teacher, but as a friend.
As one of the 6 points in the TQS, teachers need to adhere to legal duties and frameworks. This would be in accordance with school policies, as well as the Charter, the Education Act, ATA, and other relevant legislation. Mr. Nelson's activities could potentially be in violation of several legal frameworks. He is creating many opportunities for students to meet professionals in their field. However, they are only available to a select few students that are Mr. Nelson's inner circle. In the Charter, Section 15, all students have the right to equal benefit, but these opportunities are only available to a select few in his class. This section from the Charter entails that all students will have an equitable opportunity to be included in the typical learning environment or program of choice. Even though these activities may be taking place outside of school hours, they are opportunities to improve oneself or further education. Mr. Nelson is not being equitable or inclusive of all students. By having these social gatherings with his previous football pals, Mr. Nelson is providing the select group of athletes an advantage that is not provided to the rest of the team. Mr. Nelson is excluding students by only inviting the elite players on his team to his social gathering. Connected to my previous statement, by not inviting all of the football players, he is denying the benefits and perks that can come from meeting these scouts. By inviting only the quote-unquote best players, Mr. Nelson is granting a special advantage to these select students. As Mr. Nelson is inviting his students over to his home, in the case study they say they often spend some weeknights and Saturdays watching football games on television or simply hanging out and socializing. It might be better used to make events like these at school possible, like a football game viewing, and foster these relationships within the team and among other students while maintaining a positive role model figure. It is clear Mr. Nelson is a comfortable and caring person to trust, and he believes he has good intentions. He wants his students to develop as individuals, but these acts can be misstated and Mr. Nelson needs to be thinking of the greater risk of his actions. That can come up with his teacher's off duties. This kind of behavior can blur the boundaries between teacher and student, leading to potential conflicts of interest, misunderstandings, and even allegations of misconduct. As well with the Youth and Criminal Justice Act also sets out procedures for offenses committed by individuals under the age of 18. Serving alcohol to underage individuals could potentially lead to legal responsibilities under this act.
For loss of trust, within this case, we see that a teacher abuses his authority over the other students, and this can lead to favoritism among students, could lead to between student conflict and student-teacher conflict, especially within the environment this is taking place, in a private setting outside of school grounds. And parents of students and teachers act as guardians and positive role models for their children. The conduct of Mr. Nelson goes against in loco parentis and the expectations of teachers. For teachers as parents, if a student sees a teacher as a parent, then they are supposed to act in the same manner that a parent would to their child. It then becomes difficult not to see your teacher that way, also showing how this teacher is both aiding in this student's education, but also causing bad habits within them too. Because a teacher will always try to reflect what the ideal student should be, and they should always try to be a great role model. I would try to do this through an authoritative teaching style, which is providing for the needs of the student themselves and also demanding the student to become better. The teacher is always serving as a role model, no matter the grade, on or off duty, and they must be a careful, diligent parent and also teacher.
We created an infographic for our topic, the multiple roles of teachers. This helps break down the complicated data and concepts into simple, quick, and understandable points, making it easier to quickly grasp and retain the information. Even though all teachers know this and are very aware of their many roles and responsibilities, this infographic may be used as a potent reminder of our roles and highlight simple tips so we are aware of our boundaries. Relating to our case study, a big takeaway is to remind yourself that in order to teach, we need to be positive role models while also maintaining an authority figure to your students, and they need to see you as that.
In summary, as educators, we are expected to take on various roles such as social workers, parents, police, therapists, professional educators, coaches, and much more. And this demand seems to be ever increasing. Another point is that it's imperative that we create safe environments for our students and ensure that we are fostering effective and appropriate relationships with them. This case study showed the implications that can arise from not maintaining boundaries with our students within our multiple roles.